Tennessee had a terrible start to the 2019 season, but they ended 2019 on a 6-game winning streak. Can the Volunteers carry that momentum and continue that streak going into 2020? Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, the best kept secret in all of college football. Today bringing you our 2020 Tennessee Volunteers college football predictions. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also make sure to check out everything down in the description below, where you can visit our official website, thegridironexpert.com, and also follow us on all of our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So nearly halfway through the 2019 season, all hope looked lost for Tennessee. The Volunteers were 1-4 with losses to Georgia State and BYU. People wanted Jermey Pruitt fired. But then he turned everything around, and everybody loved Jermey Pruitt again, as the Volunteers won 6 of their final 7 games, the only loss coming to Alabama on the road. And that also included a thrilling win over Indiana in their bowl game to finish 2019 at 8-5. A 1-4 start, but they finished 8-5. And expectations are very high in Knoxville going into 2020. The Volunteers have a very experienced squad, and with a home game against Florida, with a home game against Alabama, and maybe a trap game for the Sooners in Norman, many are expecting a big year from Jermey Pruitt and his Volunteers. We take a look at their roster here. They returned 9 starters on offense, which is great. That's perfect. They've got a lot of experience. They've got a lot of talent. But this was an offense that ranked 100th in the country in total offense last year. They weren't explosive. Tennessee wasn't going to go out and beat you in a shootout. Maybe the offense takes a major step forward in 2020. They arguably have the best offensive line in the entire SEC. So they're going to be very strong up front. We know you need a strong offensive line and a strong defensive line to win in the SEC. So Tennessee's got that. They have a very strong running game. They've got 3 capable backs. Ty Chandler, Eric Gray, Tim Jordan, all returning for the Volunteers, all combining for over 1,600 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns last year. But when you look at the passing game, that's the major concern for me. They lose their top 2 wide receivers in Juwan Jennings and Marquez Callaway. So you lose your top 2 wide receivers there, which means Josh Palmer has to step up, and Jarrett Guarantano has to step up as well. A quarterback for Tennessee that's had his highs, like the 415-yard, 2-touchdown performance against Missouri, and his lows, like the 107-yard, 2-interception performance against Florida during his Tennessee career. He threw for over 2,100 yards and 16 touchdowns last year, but Guarantano's got to work on his decision-making. He's got to work on his accuracy, and Tennessee's got to find some consistency at that quarterback position if they ever want to take a step forward in conference play and ever want to take a step forward nationally as well. Defensively, they returned 5 starters. Tennessee did not allow more than 22 points in those final 6 games, so they turned it around big time. The defense, a major reason for that 6-game winning streak to conclude 2019. They allowed just 21.7 points per game on the year, but they lose a lot of key starters across the board. You lose your interception leader in Nigel Warrior. You lose your tackle leader in Daniel Petulli. You lose your sack leader in Darrell Taylor. So you lose a lot of people up front, a lot of people over the course of that defense for the Volunteers. But luckily, they did have the 16th ranked passing defense in the country last year and the 23rd total defense in the country last year as well. And Bryce Thompson will be back in that secondary to kind of continue the strength with the passing defense, leading a secondary that had 15 interceptions last year to just 14 passing touchdowns allowed. They had more interceptions than they had passing touchdowns that they gave up. It's pretty dang impressive. So Tennessee, high expectations in Knoxville. Can they meet them? We have them opening up 2020 with a win against Charlotte. This is not an automatic victory by any means. A Charlotte team that, now led by Will Healy, went 7-6 last year in his first season as a head coach, and returned Chris Reynolds a very dangerous dual-threat quarterback for the 49ers, and a defense that also is 14th in the country in their passing D. Tennessee may have to win this game on the ground, but we do think they take care of Charlotte at home, and luckily we do not see another Georgia State incident to kick off the season. Tennessee then travels to Oklahoma in Week 2, so that's a major blockbuster Week 2 game, tons of those in 2020. And a lot of people think that the Volunteers could go on the road and upset the Sooners. We do not believe that. We're giving Tennessee a loss here. Oklahoma, yes, has more questions than usual across the board this season. For the first time, they don't have a transfer quarterback coming in, so they're probably going to rely on Spencer Rattler. So the major question is, how well does he step into that starting role for Lincoln Riley in the Sooners? How well does he build chemistry with the wide receiver core that's very depleted and not nearly as talented and explosive as we've seen in years past? But Lincoln Riley is an offensive guru, guys. He's a quarterback guru as well. Spencer Rattler was one of the highest rated prospects coming out of high school for a reason. I think he's going to do just fine with the Sooners. And don't sleep on Alex Grinch and that Oklahoma defense either that returns 9 starters. They played very well last year up until that LSU game. But then again, not many people were stopping the Tigers anyways. So I think Oklahoma at home gets a closer than they would like win over Tennessee. But the Volunteers to me just don't have enough to go on the road and snag one there. They're 2-1 with a win over Furman, and then we hit SEC play. Home game against Florida. This is another very trendy upset pick if you're a Volunteer fan, and maybe for some other analysts out there. I think maybe Tennessee could upset the Gators at Neyland Stadium. And of course, home field advantage will be a huge role in this one, of course, if we have fans in attendance. But you look at the trends, guys. Florida has won 14 of the past 15 matchups against the Volunteers. Tennessee fell to the Gators 34-3 last year, and I believe it was 47-21 the last time these two teams met in Knoxville. Florida, great quarterback in Kyle Trask, good wide receivers, very talented tight end in Kyle Pitts, arguably the best secondary within the SEC. Kyer Elam, you've got Sean Davis. This is a very good Florida secondary, meaning, again, that Tennessee might have to win this game on the ground. And Florida had the 8th-ranked rushing defense in the country last year. 8th-ranked rushing defense in the country last year to go with a very dangerous secondary. I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to move the ball all that well in this game despite having home field advantage. And I think the Gators do come on the road and get a win. This is a Florida team, guys, that could very well win the SEC East and could be challenging for a spot in the college football playoff. So the Volunteers dropped their second game of the season to the Gators, but bounced back with a win against Missouri and South Carolina. So just like that, they are 4-2. The Missouri game we don't have to talk about too much. Jarrett Guarantano had one of the best games of his career last year against Missouri. Again, throwing for over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. I don't have a lot of faith in Eli Drinkwitz in Columbia, at least not in year 1. Missouri might have a solid defense, but they're not going to have that much offense. Offense is going to struggle mightily. And with the game being at Neyland Stadium, I think the Volunteers win handily in this one. And then the road game at South Carolina is one that, again, Tennessee cannot afford to overlook. Williams-Brice Stadium, not necessarily an easy place to play. But the Volunteers did defeat the Gamecocks by 20 last year. And this is a South Carolina team that still had a lot of questions offensively. Kind of like Missouri here, Tennessee benefits from 2 teams that have way too many questions on the offensive side of the ball. Will Ryan Helinski take a step forward? Can South Carolina stay healthy? Who's going to play running back for South Carolina? Who's Ryan Helinski going to even throw to? Too many questions offensively. Even though the game is on the road, the Tennessee defense steps up big time in this one and gets a key road win. 4-2 going into their bye week on October 17th. We then hit the third Saturday in October, the classic rivalry matchup between Alabama and Tennessee. But it really hasn't been much of a rivalry over the past decade or so. Alabama has won 13 straight against the Volunteers, and only 2 of those 13 games have come by 1 possession. Tennessee hasn't been competitive in this game. It's plain and simple, guys. They have not been able to compete with Alabama for over a decade now. A lot of people think this could be a trendy upset pick. They're coming off a week of rest. Alabama loses a lot. Maybe Tennessee, if they meet those expectations, if they're 4-2 or better, they snag a win over the Crimson Tide. We don't think that's going to happen either. They're going to drop this game to Alabama, a team that is going to be healthy defensively now. They lost so much on their defensive side of the ball last year due to injuries. Most of them should be back this year. Mac Jones had plenty of playing experience and playing time when Tua Tagovailoa was down with an injury. I think him, paired up with Najee Harris, paired up with a very dangerous wide receiver core, despite the losses of Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy, Alabama's going to be just fine. If you've got Nick Saban on your side, they're going to be just fine. And again, keep in mind, Alabama didn't lose their coordinators. It's the first time in years Alabama hasn't had to go through brand new schemes and brand new developments and building chemistry with new coaches. That's going to go a long way, more than people think. So Alabama comes on the road, takes care of Tennessee at home. They are 4-3, and they head into a Halloween matchup against Arkansas. Tennessee has not visited Fayetteville since 2011. These two teams, cross-division rivals, have not met since 2015 when Arkansas came into Neyland Stadium and defeated the Volunteers 24-20. This is a very big trap game for Tennessee here, guys. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by that and maybe disagree with that. But we're giving Tennessee a loss here to the Razorbacks. We're giving Tennessee a loss to Arkansas, and we will explain our reasoning why. We are aware that Arkansas has not won an SEC conference game since 2017. But I think a lot of factors go into this victory here. First thing is the Alabama hangover. Is Tennessee hung over after a loss to Alabama? If it's a heartbreaking defeat, if they hang with them and lose in gut-wrenching fashion, guarantee they will be. If they get beat up and annihilated like they have been for the past 13 years, they very well could be as well. It's on the road in Fayetteville. Arkansas is coming off a bye week, and Arkansas brings in a great offensive coordinator in Kendall Briles, new leadership under Sam Pittman, who has done a phenomenal job building up that offense. They bring in Felipe Franks, the transfer quarterback from Florida, who had playing experience against the Volunteers during his time down in Gainesville. You have Rakeem Boyd, one of the best running backs in the SEC, going up against a Tennessee defense that allowed over 140 rushing yards per game last year. So I look at this Arkansas offense, it's going to be way better than anything you saw in 2 years under Chad Morris. I think Tennessee a little bit hungover, Arkansas off a week of rest. I think the Razorbacks pull off this win. Tennessee has been prone to those letdown games, to losing games that they shouldn't. And this is one that I see happening here in 2020. So they lose to Arkansas, but bounce back at home with a win against Kentucky. And a very good Kentucky team at that. A Kentucky team that Tennessee defeated 17-13 last year. And keep in mind, though, guys, Tennessee has kind of dominated the recent series against the Wildcats. The Volunteers have won 7 of the past 8 against Kentucky. Only one of those 7 wins coming by 1 possession, and it was the game last year in 2019. So while Kentucky will finally have a quarterback under center, Terry Wilson should be back at QB. You don't have to worry about Lynn Bowden running the show. While I do have very strong offensive line, while I do have a very talented running back duo, and while I do have a great defense that was 21st nationally last year, I think with the game being in Knoxville, and this almost feeling like a must-win situation for Tennessee, now they do have 4 losses, I think they come back home and do defeat the Wildcats in a relatively low-scoring game. I don't see either team in this one exceeding 24 points. So they defeat Kentucky, but of course lose to Georgia, a road game in Athens against arguably the number 1 defense in the country. 8 returning starters for the Bulldogs this year, and then an offense that's going to be revamped under Todd Monken, the new offensive coordinator. Georgia, like Florida, is an SEC title contender, of course, and a college football playoff contender as well. And with the game in Athens, I don't feel confident at all for this Tennessee team, one that fell to the Bulldogs 43-14 last year. So they're sitting here 5-5. They haven't even clinched bowl eligibility. They're going to do it here against Troy. So they're 6-5, and we of course give them a win over Vanderbilt as well. Vanderbilt, a team under Derek Mason that returns all of their starters defensively, but has basically no offense. Basically no offense. They lose their biggest offensive playmakers from last year. They have questions at quarterback. They have questions at wide receiver. It's going to be a rough year for the Commodores, this in-state rivalry game. I think it's going to be the last year for Derek Mason in Nashville. And if someone even wants to go out there and say, well, their defense is going to be solid. We try to say that every year with Derek Mason to give Vanderbilt some, sliver of hope. And Eric Gray kind of dashed all those hopes last year, rushing for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns in that 28-10 victory for Tennessee over Vanderbilt last year. So, say Vanderbilt improves and stops the run, I think Jarrett Guarantano and the quarterback play does just enough to win this game against Vanderbilt, and they win it comfortably. So, after a very rough start, or really a 4-2 start and a horrible finish, Tennessee does finish 7-5, and I get that's going to be very disappointing for some. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. You don't like the Arkansas pick? Fine, bump them up to 8-4. You think they're going to upset Florida? Alabama? Probably not. I think out of those big games, Oklahoma, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, the big four, Tennessee's most winnable games of those four are against Oklahoma on the road and Florida at home. And I still think the Volunteers are still just a little bit ways away from competing at that elite level, to competing at top 10 level, like the likes of Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and Oklahoma. The ceiling for this Tennessee team is 9-3. The ceiling is 9-3. They have the talent to get there. I just don't see it yet. I think the Volunteers are still 1 year away. Jermey Pruitt continues to do a fantastic job on the recruiting trail. He had a fantastic turnaround last year. 7-5 this year, a win in the bowl game gets them 8 wins for the second year in a row. Tennessee continuing to head in the right direction, and it's not going to be very long before they're really contending for the SEC East crown. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. Also, make sure to check out everything down in the description below, where we have exclusive content on our website, thegridironexpert.com, and also on our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.